Guys, the weather is so gloomy today that I needed to put a light outside the window to record today. What's up, everybody? So, in case you didn't know, we had earthquakes a few days ago in California, and I feel like if you didn't hear about them, that surprises me because the media does a very good job of letting everyone know that we had an earthquake in California, which I understand natural disasters, they call for a lot of news and a lot of coverage. But a lot of times, these natural disasters really aren't as bad as you would think. It's certainly not as bad as what it makes everybody else think. Because now being a California resident for a few years now, I had all my family and friends from back home like asking if I was okay, making sure that we didn't get rumbled or that the house didn't fall off the side of the hill. And, on Facebook, I actually like the local news page from my hometown in West Palm Beach, Florida. So I was on Facebook scrolling, and I had liked their page, so I always see kind of like the local news because I'm curious to know what's going on back home. And it showed footage of this family filming their pool. And, the ground was kind of rumbling a bit, but you could see the pool water was going like this. It was going crazy, big waves in the pool. And these people must have been a lot closer to where the actual earthquake happened because it's I think it's like an hour and a half away from where we are here in the valley. But, it was a bit of a scary video, and I could not help but look at all the comments on this video. There were a lot of comments. Now, remember, this is a local news, Facebook page that, all the Florida people have liked and subscribed to. So what I'm looking at is a lot of comments from a bunch of Floridians. And I couldn't help but kind of smile as I read these comments of all these people saying, oh, heck no, I'd rather have the hurricanes than this, or oh yeah, there's no way I'm heading out there. You can keep your earthquakes. And all these people kind of just like making jokes and basically saying like how much worse earthquakes are than hurricanes. But it got me thinking. After reading all these comments, I was kind of like, well, I'm a guy who grew up in Florida for most of my life. I've experienced so many hurricanes, both good and bad. And I've experienced a few earthquakes now. I think this was my third earthquake that I have felt since living here. And I was really weighing in my mind, well, exactly how much worse, and in terms of how much more damage does an earthquake cause over a hurricane? Because I was thinking, and I was like, well, earthquakes are pretty devastating. Like they'll shake entire buildings, and very unfortunate events, they've caused, a lot of death and huge city destruction, especially down in South America. But then I was like, but hurricanes, they cause just as much destruction, I feel like. They've knocked complete houses over. They've, knocked buildings down. They've ravaged through people's yards and knocked a ton of trees down and created huge destruction. Like, I'm pretty sure that a few hurricanes in Florida's history have caused billions of dollars of destruction, like even kind of recent ones. But I felt like because I am both a Floridian and a Californian, technically, I've made my home on both coasts, which is kind of funny because I guess I could never live in the cold. I'm either a Florida or a California guy. California gets cold for me, guys. That just goes to show you like what I've grown up with and what I'm used to. But it was just really funny reading these people's comments, and I was like, first of all, have any of you guys experienced an earthquake before? Or do you just see the videos that the news posts from just grabbing a clip from somebody in California and showing their pool shaking and water sloshing everywhere and people getting all freaked out? When in reality, I'm sure that those people were filming their pool, and I'm sure the ground rumbled, but I don't think it probably caused much damage because these past earthquakes we had didn't really cause much damage here in LA and in kind of the surrounding areas. Now, I'm sure it caused certain damage, like, closer to it, because I think it was a 6.1 or something like that. And I'm sure it was obviously worse near the epicenter. But I feel like the media loves to kind of blow up natural disasters. And I was just kind of reflecting on all of the disasters that I've gone through in my life in terms of natural disasters and hurricanes, growing up with crazy hurricanes, with school being canceled for a month. Like, there was a time where school was canceled for a month when I was in 10th grade during one of the really, really bad hurricanes. There's been so many hurricanes in Florida, since, I've grown up, that I've completely forgotten the names of the really bad ones versus the not so bad ones, because we've had so many. We've had a few of them that were really bad. We've had a few hurricanes that completely flooded our street back in Florida, where we were literally driving a boat. We were driving like a boat down the street and paddling down the street. Like, that's how flooded Florida can get. One of the really fun things we like to do in Florida when there's a hurricane is, first of all, we go around in a car to make sure that no power lines are down, because obviously it can be very dangerous to play outside in the water. So you want to make sure that there's no electrical potential issues. So we always kind of go around on like a four-wheeler or something like in Florida and make sure that there's no downed power lines. And if there is, it's typically like you don't want to go outside, period, until they shut everything off. But hurricanes, this sounds really bad because they've caused so much damage and heartache from people and people's houses coming down. But like, when a hurricane wasn't bad, the local kids were kind of happy, because we would just get to not have to go to school, and we get to like play outside in the water. And, we would tie, a rope behind a car or a four-wheeler, and we would just drive down the street, and we would like skimboard, or we would surf down the street. Like that, this would be something that we would do during a hurricane. And then of course, we'd have to get with our dad and like go around the yard and pick up all the leaves and all the trees that would blow over. But this got me thinking. It got me thinking about the comparisons between earthquakes and hurricanes, because I have experienced both. And I have to say, my first earthquake experience in California was pretty terrifying. Now, when I look back after these recent two that I experienced while living in my house, I'm thinking right now, earthquakes are not that bad. It just kind of shakes the ground a little bit and you don't really have to worry. But when I really thought back to that first earthquake that I had felt when I was renting a room out of my buddy's house in Van Nuys, when it woke me up. So it was about 6 a.m. when the earthquake hit. I believe it was a 6.6 magnitude earthquake. And I remember it being like as loud as a train, because like everything was shaking. Like the walls were shaking, the house was completely shaking. And it was one of those earthquakes that you would see like in a film, like in a movie. It was like shaking all over the place, and the bed frame is moving all around. And I remember by the time I woke up, because it woke me from my sleep at about 6 a.m., it woke me up, and it was literally over by the time I like came to my senses. But I remember just in those very few seconds, I was just totally fear stricken. Like I was like, what? I had never felt one in my life, so I did not know what to expect. And it shook the heck out of this house. And I was on the second floor. So being upstairs makes you feel like, oh, I could fall. But really, I mean, there's no really good place you could be during an earthquake if like a house was going to fall. Like if you're on the first floor, you're getting crushed. If you're on the second floor, you're probably just going to fall the whole story and get crushed by the roof ahead of you. But luckily, as bad as the house shook during that earthquake, nothing fell off the wall, nothing toppled over in the house. It just kind of shook everything pretty violently. And I remember just thinking that it was the first time I had felt it. I was like, dude, this is really, really scary. But to kind of go against earthquakes, to kind of do the other side of the spectrum, the hurricanes, you have time to prepare for hurricanes. You don't have time to prepare for earthquakes. They're just going to happen. Sure, there's like seismic graphs, and they can kind of like see where the rumbling is happening or where the plates are shifting. But essentially, like, you don't know when the heck an earthquake is going to hit. And so that is the one thing I feel like that in people's minds in Florida, or people who haven't experienced an earthquake, that's something that they kind of hold to a high level of fear, is not knowing when a disaster is going to happen, because that's pretty freaking scary. Like when you don't know when a disaster could happen living on the West Coast. So I get that, and that's something that also freaked me about moving to California. It's like when people think about going to California to visit or to go live, Like, I think earthquakes are like on the top of the list of like things that you have to like be ready for, like get ready. Like there's earthquakes there, you know, you're probably bound to feel one. But to be honest, I've only felt 3 earthquakes, and I say 3 because these last 2 happened literally a day apart. Like we had an earthquake 2 days in a row. But the first earthquake and the last earthquake, I would say, was a span of like 6 years. So we haven't really felt that many. But it's something very strange because you can either feel an earthquake in a very violent, shuddering manner, or you can feel an earthquake in the sort of watery movement manner, which is what the last one was. So I'd already felt one earthquake, and it was like the violent shaking. Oh God, it's happening! And then this last one, I'm not gonna lie, guys. Like I was on the toilet. It is what it is. Like it was like 10 a.m. I was in the bathroom on the toilet, and I'm just on my phone, you know, screwing around, looking at whatever. And so I'm just scrolling, and all of a sudden I just feel, it wasn't as if the toilet was moving, but it was as if the room just went like this. Like I was on a boat. Like the whole thing just kind of shifted. And it was so gentle yet alarming at the same time, because you know exactly what's going on. Just on the toilet, go like this, and I'm like, hey guys, like I literally yelled because Lexi's mom was in town and her little sister, and I was like, hey guys, get under a doorway. And like, I'm a little bit intense sometimes. I can be a little bit spastic when it comes to like those type of situations. So I was like pretty intense about telling them like, get under a doorway quick. And so I come out of the bathroom, and I just stand there like under the doorway. Lexi's under our bedroom doorway because it's right next to me. And we all just kind of sat there, and it was so subtle that I think Lexi didn't feel that one, but her mom and Sophie did, and I did because I was sitting down. I think she was maybe walking around or moving, so she wasn't able to truly feel it. But how you know an earthquake happened was you walk into, you know, we walked in to see like where our front like room chandelier is, and you could just see it like ever so slightly moving. We go out, we look at the pool, the water's going like this. And it's so eerie because the ground barely shook to our feeling. Like we barely felt it move, just ever so slightly. But that water was doing this, and the chandelier was moving like this. So it's a very interesting type of disaster, I guess you could call it, natural disaster, because there's certainly different types depending on how far away you are from it. But experiencing it with Lexi's mom in town was really funny because she had never been around one, never had felt one in her life. She grew up in Florida her whole life, so this was the first time she had felt it. And these were tame compared to other experiences that people have had, and earthquakes have destroyed cities before. So these were very, very slight in compared to how bad they could be. But once again, going back to that video that I saw on that Facebook page that posted from West Palm, all these people were freaking out about the earthquake and saying they would never do it. And I'm really curious to know what the consensus is from people. Like, what do you guys think is worse? Like, do you think that earthquakes or hurricanes are worse? And first of all, have you experienced either before? Because they're very kind of, they're very bi-coastal type of disasters, because hurricanes typically happen over here on the East Coast. They've been known to travel all the way up the coast, up, you know, to like the Carolinas and even further up to New York. And then the earthquakes are typically like a West Coast thing. And I think they happen also regionally in other places like where the earth plates are. But for the people that have experienced both, if there is a group, I mean, I'm sure there is a large group of people that have kind of lived on both sides of the country that really have felt both. What do you think is worse, and what do you think has caused more destruction? Because in my experience, because I haven't lived here my whole life, but I lived in Florida most of my life, and I've firsthand seen hurricanes cause so much destruction. And maybe it's not necessarily broken buildings and people not losing their houses and things falling over, but like it's more of destruction. It's very expensive work what people have to do, because it completely blows over trees, signs, traffic light poles like come down like in a really, really bad hurricane, and it just causes a huge mess. It downs the power. That's another thing. Now I know that earthquakes can take off power. I know that there are times where, you know, they'll either shut the power off or like it'll just cause power outages. But in Florida, almost every hurricane would cause a power outage. Like we wouldn't have power. There were times where we didn't have power for like 2 weeks. And I remember like we were having to use candles in the house at night. You know, we would have to use a generator sometimes. Sometimes we wouldn't have a generator. But if you talk to most Floridians, they will tell you that they have a generator at their house, because when the power goes out, you have to hook it up and it's runoff gas, and that's what powers your house. And there's different types of preparation for both disasters, which is so crazy. Like for earthquakes, you know, I know people like to store up a lot of water, because if destruction happens and the water goes out, you know, you're going to have a problem there. I know that in Florida, like the big thing is having gas, because the gas stations will stop operating and stop working. And you'll have to like get all the gas for your cars and your equipment before the hurricane hits. And if you look at lines for the gas stations before hurricanes hitting, like a day or two out, there'll be an hour wait to get gas for your car. And some people just won't be able to get it, because literally they take all of the gas, and all of the gas has been sold, and it's very hard to go and find it when you get close to a hurricane. I remember during Hurricane Andrew was one of the really, really bad Florida hurricanes in recent history. And I believe it happened in 92 or something. So I was like a baby at the time. And I remember our house was flooded. I remember it flooded our home. And I remember walking out as a little kid. It's one of my first memories. And I remember my whole family came over to our house. That's like where we congregated, like my uncles and stuff. And I remember they were all there. And I remember walking out, and I remember like the water was up to like my ankles, like my little ankles. Like our whole floor of our home was completely soaked, like inches deep of water. And that was one of my first memories as a kid. And I remember we had no power, no lights. It was like completely dark. So it's definitely crazy, like the difference between earthquakes and hurricanes and like the different damages they cause. And I simply haven't been in an earthquake that has caused so much damage, but I know they're completely devastating. And I know that, you know, they've had recent ones in South America that were completely devastating. But I don't know. I think if you talk to a Floridian, they would say that earthquakes are way worse. But I think if you talk to like maybe a Californian, because there hasn't been in a very long time like an insane amount of destruction, like where a whole city got destroyed, they would be freaked out of hurricanes. Because I've talked to both types of people, and when I tell them about hurricanes growing up, like it freaks them out. But when I look back, I'm like, hurricanes were kind of fun, because as a kid, you know, you're not really thinking of like the potential financial ruin it could cause, or like the inconvenience of having to get all your kids like prepared and to get all the food in case all the power goes out. So they're certainly very different, but I am definitely curious from all you guys, like in your opinion, I've gone through both. So like in your opinion, what do you think is worse? Like what do you think is scarier? If I had to choose, I don't know. Like hurricanes don't scare me. They just cause like a lot of inconvenience, in my opinion. Earthquakes are scary to me because they're without warning, and they can cause a lot of like structural destruction, even on a not so heavy one. Because a hurricane can definitely cause like buildings to, you know, to break and to get destroyed, but in terms of a hurricane, like it's mostly going to cause a lot of flooding, and it's going to mostly cause a lot of trees to be strewn all over the place. Like we would spend an entire day in the yard just getting all of the limbs and everything, and like it causes a lot of like, you know, just in the front of everyone's home, there's like huge piles of sticks and like debris that has fallen over. And during a really bad hurricane, you can kind of go around and see like the random things that have like blown all over the place. You also can't be outside during a hurricane except only in the eye of the storm. Like when the eye of the storm, it's like the calm part. It's like when you're halfway through, the eye is like very calm. And that's a time where everybody goes outside to like see what has happened during the first half. They're looking around like, oh, whoa, this stop sign or this street sign blew over here from like 4 blocks away. This is crazy. Like you'll see, like I remember a trampoline landed in the street, either in the street or in our neighbor's yard, a full trampoline from God knows where. was sucked up into the sky, spinning probably like a UFO, and got dropped in my neighborhood from like a different place. Like that's some like cyclone like type stuff. Like that's so crazy. And that was obviously during one of the really bad ones. The thing about hurricanes is you can prepare, and every single time a hurricane would happen, we would board up our entire house. We would put wood on the outside of all the windows. Now there's hurricane windows now that people have put on their homes if they're a little bit newer, which is basically like they're kind of like bulletproof glass, like nothing can like break through the glass. But if you had one of those, older homes, you just took a bunch of wood, you cut out the wood in the shape of like each window, and you would have to put them in and nail them so that no debris would crash through your house. I remember my grandmother and grandfather, when he was alive, Poppy, during one of the hurricanes, it blew down a large like branch, like a sharp branch, and it came down and blasted a hole through their house, and it was through their house, like probably like 4 feet through the ceiling. Like it just totally crashed through. I remember going there and seeing it, and it was a huge hole in the roof when they got it out, and they had to like repatch it. But just because of like the power and the speed of the wind, and just at the velocity it like cracked off the tree, it was like as if it was like a knife, and it just like stabbed right through their house, which is so crazy. So I don't know. After breaking these down, it's hard for me to really say what's worse, guys. But honestly, I guess I don't have quite the experience with earthquakes because I haven't really been in a very bad one, although I've been in a very scary one that shook the fear right out of me. I don't quite know which one's worse. But anyways, the earthquakes have been certainly interesting this week. We've had an earthquake every day the past 2 days, and I say every day. It's 2 days in a row, but like we've had an earthquake, one in the morning and then one was kind of in the evening. Both times was crazy. Chandelier was doing this. Pool water was like making some crazy waves. So natural disasters are insane, man. They're crazy. All right, guys. So I just want to answer a few questions because on the past few videos, you guys have been asking me just kind of my opinion on and my take on some things, and I'd love to kind of like go over them very briefly. And I want to answer a question from Cass. She says, "Could you talk about how you decide to budget for new equipment? Like, when do you decide is the right time to invest in new things, and how to choose your equipment, and what do you look for in it?" Well, Cass, I don't know exactly what type of equipment you are into. Maybe I could be a little bit more specific, but in terms of just an overall way to kind of go about buying new stuff, like for me, I'm the type of guy that could always be buying new things and like finding new ways to like make my stuff sound better, or like new guitars. Like you can never have enough guitars, But I would say you have to limit yourself based upon, equipment costs money. Do you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, it kind of comes down to money. So I would say in the very beginning, like when you're kind of starting off, you can use the bare bones equipment. Like you don't really need the best of the best. And I certainly do not have the best of the best, by the way. Like in terms of a camera, I have a pretty good camera, and this is a pretty good condenser like vocal microphone. But in terms of like if I just tell you from my perspective, all my gear is pretty, I would say, medium. Like I don't have like the insane best of the best. Like that would be very, very expensive. And the way that I go about it is if I can create what I need to create with the equipment, and it's not going to be a huge difference, like I'm okay with taking the kind of lesser expensive equipment, because I know that later on, if I'm making money at the stuff that I'm creating, I can always invest in new stuff. But if I'm kind of like doing things like DIY, like just, recording stuff and putting stuff up, like I'm trying to really minimize my costs, because you don't want the pressure. You don't want financial pressure on top of the pressure of creating and having to like put stuff out. Like you want to really, if you can, you really want to buy stuff that's used. Like you can get really good equipment that's used, that's not brand new, that's going to perform the same way as the brand new one, but you're saving maybe like 50% of what you would be paying. Like you don't need a brand new camera most of the time. You don't need a brand new mic as long as it works properly. Like you don't need to spend the money to buy something brand new. So if I'm starting off, or if I'm even like I said right now, guys, like I have pretty good equipment, and I've been able to make enough money to like buy good stuff, but it's not the tippy top of the line. Like I don't need the tip top greatest this and that. Like if you would consider this a podcast or whatever this type of video is, I kind of don't even know what it is yet, but like I would use a different microphone than this, because there's a microphone that is kind of like a condenser mic that already has this filter on top of it. It's like a podcast mic, because if I take this away, you're going to hear every pop. Like every time I say something P or B, like you're going to hear it pop. But I have this pop filter because it's a vocal mic. But if I wanted to, I could spend like a couple $100 and I could get a mic that kind of is like a vocal recording mic for like radio or podcasts. But to me, I'm just like, why do I need to spend the extra money when this thing does the job? And I bought it a long time ago, and I'm kind of using another piece of equipment for another kind of aspect of what I'm trying to do. So I would say when it comes to equipment, scale up when you feel like you've made money and you've worked hard and you've been able to, and you want to up the quality, like I would say. But I don't think you ever need to buy something brand new. And it's just your preference. Like if you're doing well, you're making good money and you want to reinvest, like it's a write-off, like camera, a mic, or whatever your equipment is that you're using for your project, like it's a write-off. So it's certainly fine to spend the money if you're doing well, but I would say like if you're kind of starting off and you're DIY and you're doing it rogue, use whatever equipment you can to just get the job done. That's what I do. I'm using a computer that I've had since 2013. My company back then bought me this laptop in 2013, and I've not had another MacBook Pro since this one. I have saved this one. I've produced a lot of my songs on this. I've written a lot of scripts on this. I've downloaded a lot of, just like auditions, and like I've watched a lot of movies. I've used the heck out of this thing, and I've had the same laptop for that long. So could I go out and buy a $2,500 new MacBook Pro? Would it be faster? Would it probably be a better idea? Would I get stuff done more efficiently? Yeah, but like this thing works and it does the job. So that's why I'm not trying to scale up, just because like if I have money to spend, like I'm gonna probably use this thing kind of like a farmer would use his pickup truck. He's going to use it till it goes down, until he absolutely needs something new. So I hope I answered your question in the right way, but I just answer everything and I give my opinion on my perspective. So I hope it makes sense, Cass. Thank you so much for asking that question. I hope this could be helpful, guys. I hope this conversation was interesting. I just wanted to get on and kind of talk about these crazy earthquakes we've been happening and that have been happening, and I wanted to get your take on what your thoughts are about them, because natural disasters are just crazy. And now that I've lived on both coasts of the United States, I have felt both. The last thing I haven't felt yet or have gone through yet is a cyclone. What else have I not experienced? I guess a typhoon is similar to a hurricane. So I guess technically I know what I've been through a typhoon, but yeah, there's a few more natural disasters. A tornado and a cyclone I think are the same thing, but like a tornado I have not gone through, but that looks scary. And of course, because I've never experienced one, but yet I've seen all the media coverage and destruction of a tornado, I'm going to tell you that a tornado looks like the scariest one to me. Not announced, comes out of the sky, sucks everything up. It can suck up a car, a cow up into the sky, and like throwing cars into houses. And that's why you have to have a basement out there in the Midwest, so you don't die from the tornadoes. So anyways, guys, hope you guys aren't dealing with any natural disasters this week. Have an awesome week, and I'll see you guys on the next one.